Stand up. That seat isn't yours. The man's voice cut through the refined air of the first-class cabin like a blade. Every clink of glass and spoon fell silent. All eyes turned toward the front row, where Adrian Shaw looked up, his expression calm to the point of being cold. Carter Vale, crisp white shirt, silver watch gleaming under the cabin lights, stood blocking the aisle, one hand gripping the seat, his face carrying the arrogance of someone who'd been served his entire life. "Someone like you doesn't sit in 1A, he said, each word landing like an order the world was expected to obey. Mina Park, the young flight attendant, glanced nervously between them. She tried to smile, her voice trembling. "Sir, there might be a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Carter interrupted sharply. "This is my seat." Adrian remained still. The light reflected off his face, an ordinary face, unassuming, giving away nothing of his true status. Only one thing made people uneasy: his silence. No reaction, no explanation. Just a look, calm, almost frighteningly so. "You have 10 seconds, Carter said, his tone as dry as a death sentence. Luis Ortega, the senior flight attendant, rushed over, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "Gentlemen, please, let's stay calm. We'll sort this out." "Who is he?" Carter snapped. "You're delaying this flight over one passenger sitting in the wrong seat." Luis bowed slightly, his politeness strained to desperation. "Mr. Vale, your ticket is for 3C. Seat 1A is already assigned." "Then who's sitting there?" Carter sneered. "An employee? A technician? Do you even know who I am?" Mina gripped the drink tray tighter, her heart pounding. She knew Carter, the son of Aurelian Air's CEO, a man who could end a crew's career with a single phone call. She turned to Adrian, silently hoping for an apology, some gesture of compromise. But he only pressed his lips together and said quietly, firmly, "You should lower your voice." The words weren't loud, yet they shattered the silence like a stone breaking glass. The entire cabin froze. Adrian turned toward the window, his tone deep, no longer a suggestion, but a warning. "Don't make this the most expensive mistake of your life." Carter froze. Under the soft golden light, he saw something in the other man's eyes. Not fear, but authority. A kind of power that didn't need to be proven by shouting. Luis whispered, "Sir, perhaps we can move him to another seat." Adrian turned back. "That won't be necessary. I'm sitting where I belong." He took his boarding pass, placed it gently on the table. No wasted movement. Seat 1A. Name, Adrian Shaw. Mina looked down. The name felt hauntingly familiar. She had seen it before, in an internal company email. The founder of the flight infrastructure system their airline was currently using. She swallowed hard. Carter didn't have time to respond before an older passenger spoke up. "He has the ticket. He sits there. What's the problem?" The cabin stirred with murmurs. Someone began recording. Louise looked at Mina, his eyes pleading for help. She only shook her head. Too late. Outside, sunlight shimmered against the airplane's body. Inside, the tension was sharp as a blade. And in the middle of it all, Adrian Shaw, the man mistaken for someone ordinary, sat perfectly still, his calm more terrifying than anger. No one knew that just a few hours later, this silent man would bring an entire airline to its knees with the very silence they had mocked. "You have 10 seconds." Luis Ortega's voice came out hoarse, trembling with tension. The first-class cabin seemed to shrink into a pressurized box. Every gaze was fixed on Adrian Shaw, who sat motionless in seat 1A, back straight, fingers loosely intertwined on his knees. 8, Carter counted, a smirk curling on his lips like a man convinced of his victory. No one breathed. Mina Park stood nearby, her hands gripping the drink tray until her knuckles turned white. The scent of Carter's expensive cologne mixed with the synthetic leather and recycled air, thick enough to choke on. Adrian looked up. The golden light streaming through the window caught his eyes, turning them metallic, cold, but impossibly deep. "You should spend those seconds," he said softly, "asking yourself why you think you deserve more than others." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin like electricity. A man in row 2 leaned forward. "What's going on?" Carter let out a short laugh, masking the crack in his composure. "I'm a Platinum Elite passenger. I fly this route every month. Seat 1A has always been mine." "Then maybe they should print your name on it," Adrian replied, voice calm and low. "But until that happens, my ticket is the only one that matters." Luis stepped in quickly, his tone pleading, "Gentlemen, please, we can work this out." "No," Carter snapped. "I'm not sitting behind this man." He turned to Mina. "Call a manager." At that moment, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Margaret Ellison, silver-haired, pearls glinting at her neck, spoke clearly, her tone aged but unshakable. "Young man," she said, "the person whose name is on the ticket sits in the seat. Stop embarrassing yourself." Carter whipped around, his face flushing crimson. "Do you even know who I am?" "No," she said evenly, "and I don't need to. But I know who's acting like a child." A stifled laugh escaped somewhere in the cabin, then died out quickly. The air split in two, half fear, half admiration. Luis bent slightly, sweat rolling down his temple. "Mr. Shaw, if you could just move to 3C, Adrian cut in, his voice quiet but sharp enough to stop everything. "What were you about to say?" "That respect can be traded for a glass of wine and a forced apology." Luis fell silent. Mina bit her lip. She could feel it now. This wasn't just about a seat. It was a test of character. Carter leaned closer, his voice low and venomous. "You're making a mistake. I can make sure you never fly Aurelian again." Adrian tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Then you'd better hope I don't fly your airline." The words were simple, but prophetic. Colin Hart, the ground supervisor, appeared at the cabin door, his face tense. "What seems to be the problem?" Luis exhaled as if seeing a lifeline. "Passenger 1A refuses to switch seats for a VIP guest." Colin glanced between Adrian and Carter, about to speak, but Adrian's eyes stopped him cold. There was something in them, calm, piercing, and strangely familiar. "Mr. Vale," Colin said carefully, "I'm afraid regulations don't allow reassignment of a confirmed seat unless it's for safety or technical reasons." Carter's mouth fell open. "You're taking his side?" Colin swallowed hard. "I'm taking the side of the rules." A small burst of applause broke from the back, quickly silenced. Mina drew a deep breath, realizing her heart was pounding not from fear, but from respect. Carter took a step back, his expression hardening. "You'll regret this." Adrian met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe, but not today." The cabin fell into silence once more, a silence heavy as steel, the kind that signaled the birth of a coming storm. And at its center stood the man named Shaw, the calm before the Empire's reckoning. The air in first class was so thick it felt ready to explode. Outside the window, sunlight slid across the plane's silver body, gleaming like a silent insult. Inside, every breath could be counted. Colin Hart drew in a deep breath, trying to regain control. He stepped forward between the two men, his voice low but firm. "Gentlemen, we all want to depart on time. If Mr. Shaw would agree to move to seat 3C, Aurelian Air will compensate you at twice the ticket price and include full access to the signature lounge." Mina held her breath. It was an offer too generous. For anyone else, it would have been the perfect way to save face and walk away. But Adrian simply tilted his head, his eyes calm as still water. "No one can buy what I'm holding on to." Colin frowned. "And what might that be, sir?" "Dignity," Adrian replied. The faint clink of a spoon against a glass rang out. Then silence. The entire first-class cabin froze. Everyone could feel it. Something unseen had just shifted. Carter let out a dry laugh, trying to mask his discomfort. "You're turning a minor inconvenience into some kind of philosophy lecture?" Adrian turned to him, his tone unshaken. "No. I'm simply reminding you that being used to privilege doesn't give you the right to belittle others." Margaret Ellison nodded slightly, her voice steady and cutting through the air. "He's right. If fairness only exists on paper, this airline should change its slogan." Another man in row 2, Trevor Lynn, a middle-aged businessman, added, "Mr. Shaw, I can confirm the airline's booking system never assigns the same seat to 2 tickets. If your name's on 1A, then 1A belongs to you." Colin glanced around, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew everything was being recorded. The so-called VIP accommodation policy had just turned into evidence of bias. He bowed his head. "I understand, Mr. Shaw. There must have been a system error." Adrian spoke softly. "Errors happen when people choose sides before choosing what's right." The words made Colin freeze. For a brief moment, he realized the man before him wasn't just a passenger. The way he spoke, clear, precise, with quiet authority, was the voice of someone used to making big decisions. Carter, sensing control slipping from his hands, lowered his voice, unable to hide his bitterness. "Who do you think you are? A lawyer? Some kind of aviation regulator?" Adrian's lips curved faintly, his gaze turning cold. "No. I'm the one who designed the systems your airline uses to coordinate its flights." The cabin went dead silent. Colin's head shot up, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Helios Grid," he whispered. Mina dropped her tray. Carter's eyes widened, his voice cracking. "You're lying!" Adrian said nothing. He simply lifted his phone, showing the screen. An executive ID with the logo. Helios Grid Systems. A single flash. Undeniable proof. Luis Ortega exhaled sharply. "Sir, you're Mr. Shaw," Adrian replied calmly. The man he just said wasn't qualified to sit here. The cabin erupted in hushed murmurs. Some passengers started recording. Others stared at Carter with a mix of pity and shock. Carter swallowed hard, his face drained of color. "If you really are him, then," Adrian cut him off, his eyes colder than steel. "There is no if, only consequences." Colin bowed deeply. "On behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for this incident, Mr. Shaw." Adrian nodded once, his tone level, without a hint of triumph. "Keep your apology. Use it to teach your people how to behave." The engines hummed softly beneath the floor, a signal that the plane was ready for departure. But inside, another kind of engine had begun to run, silent, slow, and dangerous. No one realized that at this very moment, over one seat, over one conversation, an entire airline's axis had just begun to tilt. Outside, sunlight burned across the plane's surface. Inside, power had shifted, and everyone had just witnessed it change hands, from the loudest voice to the quietest one. The engines rumbled softly beneath the floor, signaling that it was time for takeoff. But inside the first class cabin, no one felt ready. The air was thick, as if even sound itself was afraid to break the fragile silence hanging in the room. Carter Vale sat rigid in seat 3C, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles twitched along his face. His eyes bored into the seat ahead, where Adrian Shaw remained still in 1A, calm as though no storm had ever passed through. Mina Park approached with a trembling hand as she poured water. "Mr. Shaw, would you like anything else? Water, or perhaps—" Adrian looked up, his faint smile drifting like smoke. "No, thank you. I only want this flight to be peaceful." His tone was warm, yet something within it sent a chill down Mina's spine. It wasn't a threat. It was controlled power. From the row behind, Margaret Ellison whispered to the passenger beside her. "That man should have been in that seat from the beginning. Poor airline. They have no idea who they've just offended." Her words were swallowed by the steady hum of air outside the window, but they reached the ears of Luis Ortega, who had just returned from contacting ground control. He looked at Adrian, his eyes heavy with guilt and fear. "Mr. Shaw," Luis said quietly, "on behalf of the entire crew, I want to apologize. What happened here does not represent this airline's true values." Adrian didn't turn his head. "Perhaps not, but it represents the true culture of the people running it." Luis bowed his head, his voice tight with shame. "I understand." The cabin fell into silence again. Only the seatbelt sign blinked gently, its reflection dancing across the polished table. Carter closed his eyes, forcing his breathing to steady. But each time he opened them, the image of the man in front of him, straight, backed, relaxed shoulders, calm eyes, reflected back his own smallness. Mina passed by, setting a glass of water on Adrian's table. "No matter what happened, thank you for staying calm." Adrian looked up, his eyes deep, unreadable. "Not because they deserved it," he said softly, "but because I do." The words landed lightly, yet hit Mina like a quiet earthquake. She felt ashamed that she had feared losing her job more than losing what was right. In that moment, she understood. Some people don't need power to make others reflect on themselves. The plane began to roll toward the runway. The last light of the afternoon brushed over Adrian's face, outlining his hair in gold. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. To everyone else, the incident was over. But in his mind, it had only just begun. Behind him, Carter muttered, "One day, you'll regret this." Adrian opened his eyes, but didn't turn around. Maybe. But I don't think that day is today. Luis glanced at Mina. They both heard it, but neither dared to speak. As the plane lifted off the ground, the city below shrank into miniature lights, layers of golden clouds stacked above them like walls of light. Adrian looked out the window, his hand brushing the armrest of seat 1A, an ordinary seat, now a symbol of the line between arrogance and dignity. Outside, the world drifted away. Inside, a silent vow began to form. If an airline can belittle a person just to flatter the ego of the powerful, then it doesn't deserve to fly in the skies I helped build. No one heard that vow. But hours later, that very silence would send an empire plummeting from the sky. The plane touched down on Seattle's damp runway, glistening with a cold, silvery sheen beneath the fading light. As the wheels met the ground, a collective rippled through first class, not from relief, but from release. The pressure had broken. Adrian Shaw unbuckled his seatbelt slowly. He waited as the others rose, pretending not to glance his way, pretending to forget the humiliation that had hung in the air, miles above the earth. But he knew. Every eye was still drawn to him, caught somewhere between curiosity and awe. Mina Park approached, her voice soft but sincere. "Mr. Shaw, I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry for what happened." Adrian turned, his gaze kind but unyielding. "Don't apologize to me, Mina. Apologize to yourself if you ever find that you've stayed silent in the face of something wrong." She froze. His eyes held no anger, only the reflection of something she hadn't wanted to face. The fear of doing what's right when the world expects obedience. Luis Ortega stood by the door, forcing a professional smile. "Thank you for flying with Aurelian Air, sir." Adrian paused for a moment. "Tell me, Luis, do you know which system your company uses to manage its flights?" Helios Grid Systems, I believe." Adrian nodded slightly. "Good. Then when they ask why their system suddenly starts responding slower, tell them I'll be in touch." Luis blinked, confused, but something instinctive made his stomach drop. Adrian left the cabin, stepping through the metal doorway, the threshold between humiliation and power. The daylight hit him hard, but he didn't blink. Each step carried the weight of quiet precision. A black sedan waited on the tarmac. The driver bowed. "Welcome back, Mr. Shaw." Adrian gave a small nod. Words weren't necessary. Silence carried enough authority. As the car pulled away, the city of Seattle blurred behind rain, streaked glass. Towers shimmered, neon signs flickered. A world that looked polished on the surface, but underneath it was stacked with the same arrogance as Carter Vale. Adrian unlocked his phone. A message from Nia Tran, COO of Helios Grid Systems, flashed on the screen. "Aurelian Air just signed a 3-year expansion deal. Congratulations, you can finally rest." He stared at the text for a long moment, then typed a short reply. Not yet. The screen dimmed, reflecting his face, sharp, composed, and forged in steel. In his mind, every detail of the flight aligned perfectly. Every insult, every glance, every forced smile. Nothing was forgotten. He wasn't angry. Anger was emotional. He preferred calculation. Anger makes you want revenge. Calculation teaches lessons. City lights danced across his face, fractured like waves. His voice came low, almost a whisper. No one can bring me down with their contempt. They only dig their own graves. When the car stopped before the towering glass headquarters of Helios Grid, the clock read 7:46 p.m. Adrian stepped out, his dark coat shifting softly in the rain. Droplets slid down the marble steps like thin silver threads. Inside, warm amber light stretched across the polished stone floor. The night staff bowed quietly, asking no questions. They were used to their CEO returning this way, silent, precise, deliberate. He entered the elevator. As the doors closed, the brushed steel caught a faint reflection of his face, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips, not of amusement, but of recognition. The war hadn't begun, but Aurelian Air had just started its own countdown. The headquarters of Helios Grid Systems stood in the heart of Seattle, a towering structure of glass and steel that looked like the city's own spine. Inside, everything operated with absolute precision. Every step, every keystroke, every flicker of light moved as if pre-programmed. And at the very top, where decisions could reshape the aviation industry, Adrian Shaw had just stepped into his office. Midnight. The city below still glowed like a living circuit board. Adrian set his briefcase on the desk, loosened his tie, and stared at the massive screen displaying hundreds of active flight routes across the globe. Amid the calm, steady blue lines, one logo blinked repeatedly. Aurelian Air. The door opened. Naya Tran, Helios's COO, entered holding a tablet close to her chest. She was 30.6, her face sharp and poised, her eyes reflecting unwavering loyalty. "You're still here?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," Adrian replied evenly. "There's something I need to adjust." Jaria placed the tablet on his desk. "I'm guessing it has to do with Aurelian?" He nodded. "What do you want from them, Adrian? Terminate the contract? Impose penalties?" "No," he said quietly, shaking his head. "I want them to recognize the value of what they dismissed." Her brow furrowed. "How?" Adrian turned his chair toward the system map. "We don't need to do anything illegal. Just follow the contract. They're currently at Tier 1 priority. Move them down to Tier 4 like every other client." "You want to strip their priority status?" "Yes. No faster, no slower. Just exactly by the book." Naya hesitated. "That will slow their response times, delay real-time updates, and affect hundreds of flights." Adrian's gaze met hers, calm as wind, sharp as a blade. "Then maybe, for the first time, they'll experience what it feels like to be treated the way they've treated others." He walked toward Tor, the glass wall, the city sprawling beneath his feet. The lights reflected in his eyes like flight paths of destiny. "Do you remember what I once told you?" he asked. "That power doesn't lie in what we say, but in how we choose to stay silent." He nodded. "Now it's time to be silent. The right way. Naya said nothing for a few seconds, then unlocked her tablet. You know this will shake Aurelian to the core. They depend almost entirely on Helios for scheduling, maintenance, and safety coordination. All the better, Adrian replied. I don't want them to collapse. I want them to understand that arrogance can't stay airborne forever. He returned to his desk, his fingers gliding over the keyboard. On the screen, Aurelian Air's system code lit up, lines of data stacked like the veins of an empire. Adrian typed calmly, his voice deliberate. Temporarily reassign Aurelian from Tier 1 to Tier 4. Maintain all contractual support, not a single line beyond the agreement. Naya confirmed with her fingerprint. A soft beep echoed. On. Screen. The priority indicator shifted from gold to grey. In that instant, an invisible pulse rippled through thousands of servers across the world. None of Aurelian's engineers noticed, but within 24 hours, every flight, every system, every click would start to feel the drag of its own arrogance. Adrian leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. That's enough. Naya watched him, a mix of admiration and unease in her eyes. You didn't have to do this. You've already won, Adrian. He looked out the window, the city lights flickering in his gaze like quiet flames. Winning doesn't matter. People like Carter Vale don't need punishment. They need a mirror. Silence settled in the room. Only the soft tap of rain against the glass and the low hum of servers below remained, the steady heartbeat of a technological giant shifting its course. Adrian closed his laptop and murmured, They thought they humiliated a man sitting in the wrong seat. What they didn't realize was that, in that moment, they woke up the man who controls the entire sky. Outside, lightning flashed across the horizon. A storm was coming, not in the clouds, but in the system. The next morning, Aurelian Air's operations center in Chicago awoke to the sound of electronic alarms. The central control wall, once glowing a stable blue, now flashed with red warnings. At first, it was just a few alerts. Then they spread like cracks across ice. Maintenance Coordination Board frozen. Seattle, Denver crew data missing. Scheduling software not responding. Urgent voices erupted across the floor. The flicker of hundreds of screens reflected off faces, tight with confusion. Within minutes, the largest aviation control hub in the country had become a maze of chaos. Samuel Boyd, the operations director, burst from his office. Report! What's happening with Helios Grid? A pale engineer replied, No sign of a cyber attack, but all servers are running at 1/4 their normal speed. It's like the system's being throttled. Contact Helios immediately, Samuel shouted. Another staff member yelled from across the room. They responded saying our requests are being queued according to contract priority level. What? Samuel roared. We're a Tier 1 client. The engineer swallowed hard. Not anymore, sir. The words hit the room like a blade. In the CEO's office, Richard Vale, father of Carter Vale, was preparing for a shareholder briefing when his secretary burst in, white as chalk. Sir, 42 flights have been delayed. Some cancelled. Media is exploding. He shot to his feet. What the hell is going on? It seems to be an issue with Helios Grid infrastructure, but they say we've been downgraded in priority. Richard felt a cold current race down his spine. Who authorized that downgrade? No one answered. The room went silent. Then a timid voice. It was Mr. Adrian Shaw. The name struck like thunder. Shaw, the CEO of Helios? Yes, sir. The man Carter had an incident with on that flight last week. Richard froze. The noise around him vanished. Only his heartbeat remained, pounding in his ears. He's the one we... Yes, sir. Humiliated in front of the entire first-class cabin? That's correct. In that instant, every piece fell into place. Carter's memory flashed back to Adrian's calm warning. Don't make this the most expensive mistake of your life. That mistake was now a billion-dollar disaster. On social media, the hashtag #HatNeverFlyAiralian shot to the top of national trends. Passenger videos from the flight went viral. Carter shouting, Adrian responding calmly. The comments were relentless. If this is how they treat customers, imagine how they treat their staff. Seat 1A just became worth more than the entire airline. Aurelian's PR department collapsed under the pressure. A frantic assistant rushed in. Every news outlet is asking if this is retaliation from Helios. Richard snapped. No, they wouldn't dare. But he knew they would. And the worst part was, they didn't have to break a single rule. Every minute that passed, Aurelian's network decayed further. Crew data duplicated. Maintenance lagged. Flights cancelled by the dozens. Passengers stranded in terminals. Children sleeping on luggage. Elderly people crying in airports. Images flooding every major network. Samuel Boyd's voice trembled as he reported, Sir, we're losing an estimated $40 million per hour. If we don't recover within 12 hours, we'll have to ground the entire fleet. Richard gripped his chair until his knuckles turned white. Get Adrian Shaw on the phone. Now. We tried. Helios replied, Your request is being processed according to contract priority level. Richard slammed the phone down and screamed, God, we picked the wrong man to provoke. Across the ocean, inside Helios Grid's San Diego office, Adrian Shaw stood before the vast glass window overlooking the Pacific. Below, the waves crashed against the cliffs, powerful, steady, relentless, just like the system he had quietly adjusted. Behind him, Naya Tran entered, her voice low. Aurelian's calling for the 8th time. Don't answer, Adrian said. You're going to let them crash? No, he replied, eyes still on the sea. I'm going to let them feel the weight of their arrogance. The sunset cast a golden line across his face, dividing light from shadow, human from system. He took a sip of coffee, calm as ever, and said softly, almost to himself, Some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be written in loss. And that night, as hundreds of Aurelian's aircraft sat grounded across the globe, the media gave the event a name: the Seat 1A collapse. The downfall that began with a single seat and ended with the silence of one man. Grey rain poured over Chicago, streaking down the glass facade of Aurelian Air's headquarters like endless tears. In Seattle, the massive boardroom glowed red with warning lights. More than half the technical team had gone 2 nights without sleep, yet every line of code they tried to fix stalled at the same point. The system priority had been reduced to Tier 4. We're losing over $80 million an hour, reported Samuel Boyd, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. Competitors are taking our market share. The press is calling this Aurelian's apocalypse. At the head of the table, Richard Vale slumped into his chair, gripping its edge until his knuckles turned white. His once proud face was gaunt, his temples pulsing with blue veins. In just a few short days, the man who once called himself the symbol of aviation had become the embodiment of defeat. "Where's Carter?" he rasped. "In New York, avoiding the media." "Tell him to prepare for a disciplinary hearing," Richard snapped. "And get me a meeting with Adrian Shaw, today." Samuel hesitated. "Sir, Helios has refused all contact. Their secretary says Mr. Shaw isn't taking any appointments this week." Richard slammed his hand on the table, spilling his glass of water. "Then I'll go to him myself." That afternoon, a convoy of black cars sped through the rain into downtown San Diego. The glowing sign of Helios Grid Systems shimmered against the dark sky, towering like a fortress of data. As Richard stepped into the main lobby, he felt as though he were entering the temple of a man he had once humiliated, without realizing it. Naya Tran greeted him with the composed precision of a blade. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vale. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to see Mr. Shaw." "He's in a meeting. Tell him to cancel it. This is a matter of life and death." Naya didn't flinch. "Here at Helios, life and death is measured by system stability, and our systems are very stable." Richard froze, forcing a breath. "Please, I only need 5 minutes." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Wait here." 12 minutes later, the door opened. Adrian Shaw entered. No bodyguards, no assistants, just a man in a dark suit with eyes calm enough to unnerve anyone. He stopped in front of Richard. "Mr. Vale." "Thank you for seeing me," Richard began, his voice rushed. "I know you're busy, but this—" "The last time we met," Adrian interrupted, "you didn't ask if I was busy." The air froze. Richard swallowed hard. "I came to apologize, and to negotiate." "Apologize for seat 1A?" Adrian asked softly, though every word carried the edge of a knife. "Apologize for everything," Richard said, lowering his head. "I was wrong. My son was wrong. The culture of my entire company was wrong. But please, help me restore our system. I'll pay whatever it takes." Adrian was silent for several seconds. The only sound was the rain striking the glass. Then he spoke slowly. "Do you really think you can buy back what you've lost?" Richard looked up, desperate. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to save the people losing their jobs, the thousands of passengers stranded." "And you think saving them will erase what Aurelian stands for?" Adrian stepped closer, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "You haven't lost your system, Mr. Vale. You've lost your company's soul." Richard stood still, each word landing like a hammer. "You've made your point," he said quietly. "No," Adrian replied. "You made it for me." The two men faced each other, once opposites in power, now standing as equals in silence. Richard's voice trembled. "If this continues, Aurelian will collapse." Adrian nodded. "And perhaps from that wreckage, something better will rise." "You don't understand. We'll lose everything." "No," Adrian said calmly. "You'll only lose the illusion that you were untouchable." Richard stared at him, eyes tired and hollow. Is there anything I can do to make you stop? Adrian turned towards the window, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the rain-soaked glass. I'm not stopping. I'm just following the contract. 2 months from now, when it expires, Aurelian can find another provider, if it still exists. Silence filled the room. Finally, Richard nodded slowly, his voice broken. You've won. Adrian turned back, his gaze steady and clear. No one wins, Mr. Vale. When respect is lost, everyone loses. Richard left the building under the rain, his umbrella tilted to one side, his steps unsteady. Behind him, through the misted glass, Adrian watched quietly, expression unreadable. Raindrops streaked down the window, splitting his reflection in two, one half in light, one in shadow. Outside, the world carried on, cars moving, lights glowing, life indifferent. But Aurelian Air, the empire that once called itself the conqueror of the skies, had just signed its own demise, with a single word, a single seat, and the silence of a man named Shaw. The next morning, the sun rose above a thin veil of clouds, casting a soft golden light. But for Aurelian Air, that light didn't mark a new beginning. It revealed the ashes. Across airports worldwide, hundreds of aircraft remained grounded. Terminals overflowed with passengers asleep on luggage, while the intercom droned hoarsely. Aurelian apologizes for the inconvenience. The apology played so many times it lost all meaning. News outlets erupted with breaking headlines. Seat 1A incident, the fall of an empire. Slow motion footage filled every screen. Carter Vale blocking the aisle, arrogance etched across his face. Adrian Shaw looking up, calm and composed, the sunlight from the window gleaming across his cheek like a mark of fate. The 2-minute clip became an icon of an era. In the comments below, millions echoed, "A man calmer than 1,000 sermons." No one deserves humiliation just because someone else has money. Respect isn't a privilege, it's a duty. Aurelian's stock plummeted 14% by noon. The airline declared an emergency. CEO Richard Vale resigned. Carter Vale was terminated. That same day, Reuters and The Guardian published simultaneous headlines. Helios Grid Systems suspends partnership with Aurelian Air, shifts focus to new partners. An empire collapsed, not through war, crisis, or accident, but through a single moment when dignity was lost. At the Helios Grid headquarters, the atmosphere was eerily quiet. There were no celebrations, no applause, no champagne. Only a silent acknowledgement of the man sitting in the top floor office, gazing out at the sea. Naya Tran entered, placing a tablet on his desk. Final report, Adrian. Aurelian has filed for restructuring. The entire industry is in shock. Adrian didn't turn from the window. I never wanted them to fall. I just needed them to pause long enough to face themselves. Naya exhaled softly. The entire sector is calling you the silent reformer, the man who changed corporate ethics with nothing but silence. Adrian smiled faintly. Silence isn't a strategy. It's the last language when words stop working. He turned toward the large display screen. Dozens of airline logos lit up. Sky Vista, Aeronova, Pacific Crown, Skylink, all sending partnership requests. Pick 3, he said. Only 3? Yes, 3 companies that put people before their brand. The rest can keep learning. Naya studied him for a moment, then nodded. Understood. I'll prioritize them. But Adrian, what is it? Have you realized you might have just changed the entire aviation industry? He answered softly, almost in a whisper. No, I only reminded it what respect truly means. That evening, a national television special aired. Seat 1A, the flight that changed aviation. The footage replayed in cinematic slow motion, underscored by solemn music. The narrator's voice resonated. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He simply sat still, and the world tilted in his favor. Margaret Ellison, the elderly passenger from that flight, appeared in an interview. When I saw Mr. Shaw sitting there, I realized dignity doesn't need proof. It carries its own weight. The screen then cut to Carter Vale, avoiding cameras at night, covering his face amid flashing lights, a fallen symbol. A week later, Aurelian Air officially declared bankruptcy. The media named it the Seat 1A effect. The impact spread like dominoes. Airlines rushed to review their service policies, introduced new codes of employee ethics, and rewrote complaint procedures. Business schools added the case to their curricula as a living lesson on respect within power. And in a Harvard classroom, a student asked his professor, "Can one person really change an entire industry?" The professor smiled, pointing to the screen showing Adrian seated in 1A, calm beneath the light pouring through the window. Yes, if that person knows when to stay silent. That night in San Diego, Adrian stood alone by the window at Helios. The city below glowed like the veins of the universe. He poured himself a glass of wine, the liquid shimmering gold and red like victory. Yet in his eyes there was no joy, only the quiet peace of a man who had seen justice restored to its rightful place. "Carter Vale," he murmured softly, as though offering a farewell. "You once believed you belonged in the sky. But sometimes it's the ground that teaches us how to truly fly." Far in the distance, a plane cut across the night sky. Along its belly, glowing letters read, "Helios Grid Systems. Respect is the foundation." And the world understood that from that moment on, every seat 1A carried a new meaning. No longer the throne of power, but the symbol of those who know how to preserve their dignity. 6 months later, the San Diego sky was clear as crystal. The flight paths powered by Helios Grid Systems stretched across the planet. Smooth, precise, and steady, like the heartbeat of a world that had finally learned to respect itself. On the top floor of the glass tower, Adrian Shaw sat in the same chair as always. But his gaze was different now. It was no longer the look of a man fighting a battle, but of one who had witnessed the quiet aftermath of a revolution. Behind his desk, the morning light gleamed against a steel inscription on the wall. "Respect is the foundation." It wasn't a slogan. It was a vow. Every Helios employee who walked by bowed their head slightly, not from habit, but reverence. Naya Tran entered, placing a cream-colored envelope on the desk. "Final report on Aurelian," she said. "The court has approved liquidation. They no longer exist." Adrian opened the envelope, scanned a few lines, then closed it. Who acquired their assets? 3 new airlines, Sky Vista, Aero Nova, and Pacific Crown. All of them now operate on Helios infrastructure. He nodded slightly. "Let's hope they fly better than the last ones." Naya hesitated, watching him. "You're not happy, are you? You won, Adrian." He smiled faintly, his tone carrying quiet melancholy. "No one wins when a culture collapses. We only learn the cost of forgetting respect." She nodded slowly. "Your lesson is spreading everywhere. They're calling it the Seat 1A effect. Airlines are launching training programs called Leadership Through Dignity, inspired by your story." He raised an eyebrow, his voice soft. "And what are they learning?" "That silence isn't weakness. It's power when guided by reason and integrity." Adrian turned back toward the window, gazing over the city. Sunlight shimmered on the waves below, each ripple moving like the gentle breathing of a calmer world. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "to rebuild something you have to let it fall. Respect can't be rewritten through apology, only through consequence." Naya smiled faintly. "And you've made sure the world carved that truth into steel." He said nothing. A soft breeze slipped through the window crack, carrying the scent of salt and sun. On his desk sat a glass frame, an old plane ticket, Seat 1A. Beside it were 2 letters, one from Richard Vale, the handwriting shaky, reading, "You were right. Respect cannot be bought," and another from Mina Park, her script elegant yet firm. "Thank you for teaching me that serving doesn't mean bowing. I'm training new crews now, and the first lesson is, see the person before the title." Adrian stared at the letters for a long moment, then murmured, "At last, someone understands." He rested his hand on the glass frame, fingers brushing lightly over the faded words. Seat 1A. Morning light caught the skin of his hand, glinting like foie. Outside the window, a jet traced across the blue, leaving a thin white trail like a signature drawn in the sky. His voice was low, almost a whisper to himself. "Never mistake silence for weakness. Some storms only begin when the noise stops." Naya looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You know, Adrian, your story made people believe justice doesn't have to shout." He smiled. "True justice is never loud. It only needs to be right." He turned back to his desk, placed the ticket inside a drawer, and locked it. Sunlight flooded the room, painting the floor in warm gold, like a memory. In the distance, the faint hum of an aircraft rose, the sound of something lifting off, free and weightless. In that moment, Adrian Shaw understood that the greatest legacy of a person is not power or wealth, but the way they compel the world to respect the values it once forgot. And so, from a single seat, Seat 1A, a new definition of human dignity was born. The story of Adrian Shaw ends like a plane landing in silence. No applause, no cheers, only understanding rippling outward like waves on water. From a single seat, a refusal, and a calm gaze in the face of arrogance, the world was reminded that dignity is not something given by others. It is something we choose to keep for ourselves. Seat 1A is no longer a mark of first class. It has become a symbol of resolve, of those who choose to stand for what is right, even if they must sit alone among the crowd. Whenever a passenger is treated unfairly, whenever an employee is disrespected, people now whisper, "Remember Seat 1A." Adrian Shaw no longer needs to make speeches or write books. He leaves behind only silence, The one language everyone understands, yet few dare to speak. Because in that silence, there is no space for pretense, only truth. If you've traveled with this story all the way here, remember this. True strength is not in a shouting. It lies in the ability to remain yourself when others try to diminish you. Silence may make people think you are weak, but sometimes silence is the thunder that makes the whole world listen. Thank you for watching Silent Defenders, where stories don't need to be loud to create change. Like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that dignity is never optional, because sometimes one person's calm is enough to make an entire world bow its head.